just like to introduce somebody who needs no introduction, but nobody here needs any introduction, but Patty Haidu, Minister and MP. Patty.
Thank you very much, Justin, for emceeing and moderating. I appreciate that. But I really do want to start with thanking Elder Jean, who I've had the great fortune of knowing since I was in my early 20s, a newcomer to Gull Bay, and we got to know each other personally. And he has served his community of Gull Bay and this wider region of northwestern Ontario in so many different roles. So I want to thank you for your leadership and your continued service to people's well-being. Elder Jean said something important, I think, which is that the Na'ama, I think I said that right, Na'ama, prayer is really about listening. It's about understanding what we're meant to do, maybe, how we're meant to do it, and how we do it with humility. And I'm always reminded that politicians always need to remember humility, and that even though we are powerful people able to make decisions sometimes slower than we'd like, but we do have power to do that we have to do it through the lens of humility and listening. And that's why it's so great to be here today with Sally Ledger and the Aboriginal Housing Corporation, who's doing that work every day, listening to people on the ground, listening to the people that you serve, understanding how to best meet people's needs. We were having an off-the-cuff conversation before we started about the mayor and I and the MPPs about how housing is the foundation, actually, of a community's health, and that we are all facing, all around this country and certainly around the world, extraordinarily difficult times for people. The pandemic was not easy. We've seen challenges with the economy as a result of the extraordinary measures that countries and communities and provinces and territories had to take. And our community members are struggling and they're hurting. And I've been hearing that across the country as I've had the opportunity to travel in my role as Minister of Indigenous Services. Indigenous people oftentimes have been hurting for a very long time, left out for a very long time. This is not a new feeling for many Indigenous people, and especially for urban Indigenous people who come to cities for all the reasons that other people come to cities, to get a better education, to be closer to healthcare, to be closer to family, to be able to partake in different kinds of activities that aren't available in remote communities. And oftentimes when people land in cities like Thunder Bay and all across the province and country, Indigenous people land in cities and towns and rural areas and northern areas, that difficult to find housing is made even more difficult by the very fact that they are Indigenous. And Indigenous people will tell you, and certainly as the former executive director of Shelter House, I heard those stories over and over of the overt sometimes and subtle racism that people face in the housing market. There was a beautiful woman that we served once at Shelter House, and she was like many people, temporarily between places. Her relationship had ended. She was challenged with keeping her family together. She wanted nothing more than to find a place to get her children back from care, who were in care as a result of poverty and a lack of a place to stay. And her name was obviously Indigenous, and she had a beautiful first name. It was Morningstar. And she told me in an interview, some of you will remember I wrote these stories back then. She told me in an interview that she was changing her name to an English-sounding name, to a British-sounding name, so that at least she could have the opportunity to go to the apartment to see it. That maybe if people could see her, that she would at least have a fighting chance to get that place. That's the kinds of stories that I certainly have heard from people all across this country as a result of this new role where I have a chance to get to know Indigenous people beyond the boundaries of Northern Ontario. And so this today is a really important announcement because it is about making sure that everybody has a fair chance to succeed and everybody has a roof over their head while they try their absolute hardest to reach their full potential. We stigmatize people without housing. We blame people without housing. We are frustrated with the state of people who are unwell, and largely because of the fact that there's no stable housing in their lives. This actually turns the table on that. So it's very exciting because this is not a standalone announcement. It's happening across the country. Just a few weeks ago in Fort Frances, for example, I was there to announce $5 million in funding for the Wadokodon Healing Lodge project. That's about safe shelter for Indigenous women, children, 2S LGBTQ community members who are fleeing domestic violence. Just a few months ago, I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba, announcing funding, infrastructure, and operating funding for Velma's Place, another similar place where women who have experienced the most extraordinary trauma in their lives will now have the security of a place to begin that healing and to be able to look towards the future with more hope and optimism. And it's about, this is really what the whole theme of the National Housing Strategy is all about. It's about helping people to envision projects just like this one all across the country that are really, in this case, Indigenous led by people who know exactly how to reach the people that need the housing the most. Nous avons fait beaucoup de chemin dans le domaine du logement et nous continuons à faire le travail pour les citoyens de Thunder Bay et de l'Ontario. And so that's why I'm thrilled to be here with you today, because I'm very excited to officially announce a federal investment of $3.8 million that will create 24 affordable housing units where many Indigenous people from the community will now have access to safe and affordable homes that will be tailored to their needs. So this project will, along with input from the province, offer support to what I would consider some of the most vulnerable people in our community. People like Morningstar that I told you about just a few moments ago. It's also, the funding for this project is provided by the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative, COCHI, which is an initiative of the Canada-Ontario Bilateral Agreement under the National Housing Strategy. And I do want to thank the advocacy of Mayor Boschkoff, MP Kevin Holland, for ensuring that Thunder Bay can actually see success under the National Housing Strategy, and that the province of Ontario continues to invest alongside the government of Canada so that we deal with this most important and fundamental issue, which is that everybody has a safe place to call home. Thank you very much, Miigwech. Such an honor.
Miigwech for that, Patty. It's just phenomenal to see this level of cooperation between three orders of government. Housing is now on the front page of the newspaper almost every day, and as Patty said, the demographic of those who are most impacted or acutely impacted are urban Indigenous people. So it's fantastic to see this level of cooperation. Next, I'd like to introduce Minister Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and MPP for Leeds-Grenville. Mr. Clark.
Thanks very much, Justin. First of all, I want to say that Elder Jean really started our event today in a very good way with not just your smudging ceremony and your song and your prayer, but your very inspiring words. And we really want to thank you for starting this event in a most perfect way. I want to thank Minister Heidi for her efforts and her advocacy. Really appreciate the work that the province and the federal government are able to accomplish together in consultation with some great municipal partners like Mayor Boschkoff, who I've known for a number of years, and he's doing a great job here in Thunder Bay, and as well the bringer of all ministers to Thunder Bay. I think PA Kevin Holland has set a record. I'm gonna probably understate the amount of ministers that he's had since he's been elected. I think it's around 35, but it might be more than that. So I'll let him clarify. I get maybe one on a break week to Eastern Ontario. So I've told Kevin over some finished pancakes this morning that I need to know his secret on how to get ministers across. So he's just been a great partner, and all of our speakers, especially our MC Justin Marchand, who's just a real, I'll steal steal a phrase from my premier, he's a true champion when it comes to housing and ensuring that everybody has a place to call home. Minister Haidu talked about the collaboration with the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative, COCHI, the fact that we've been able to, across our province, with federal and municipal support, leverage hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure that great housing projects take place. Both the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services and also the Thunder Bay District Social Service Administration Board have been able to really collaborate to build capacity in this community. But it's not just a place to call home, it's the wraparound services that are so necessary to ensure stability and to ensure success. And I want to thank every partner that's here today who is not just a part of this wonderful development that Minister Haidu outlined, but just all the work that you do each and every day in communities right across the province. Our government set a pretty aggressive goal to have at least 1.5 million homes built by 2031. It's really, really aggressive given the fact that the best year we've had in about the last 30 was in 2021 when we had just about 100,000 housing starts. So everybody's better in math than I am. You multiply that by 10 years, you're not going to get the 1.5 million. So we've got to be able to work with partners like Justin and Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services to ensure that gets done. We've taken some steps to enhance the dollars that are available. The Indigenous Supportive Housing Program, our government has increased by nearly 40% to $41.5 million annually. Really a game changer when it comes to building capacity. The work that we've done with the DSAB on the Homelessness Prevention program, really a huge increase to Thunder Bay, one of the largest increases in the province at about a 40% increase. Again, recognizing that the need is there and the province has to step up, not just with a federal cost share program, but on our own. This brings the total annual investment the province has at about $700 million, but we couldn't do it without the bilateral agreement at the federal level for the National Housing Strategy. We couldn't do it without a DSAB that always seems to have a really, really good shovel-ready project to move forward. And we can't do it without a tremendous partner like Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services. And I want to thank Justin for his work on our Housing Supply Action Plan implementation team, his work on the task force, and just to be able to have great staff building capacity in communities like Thunder Bay. So just really pleased to be here and really pleased to be back in Thunder Bay. You're gonna have to do a count just on how many times I've been here in the last 12 months, but we're really glad to support this community, and I can't wait to make the next announcement, which I think is later on today. So thanks so much.
Miigwech, Minister Clark. Next, I'd like to invite Kevin Holland, MPP of Thunder Bay and Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development. Kevin.
Morning, everybody. Great to see so many people out today. Thank you, Justin, for the introduction and to the team for your prayers and your words of wisdom today. Very much appreciated. As Minister Clark said, I have to correct him a little bit, not that I'm counting, but he is our 37th minister's visit to Thunder Bay. You're pretty close, so I think that's a real testament to the commitment that our government has in the well-being of Thunder Bay. I think it's a record across the term that we're on the first year, so it's really great for me to have that support of our government here in Thunder Bay. As Minister Clark has indicated, we've seen a substantial increase in the level of funding that has been coming to Thunder Bay, and it's an indication that our government's been listening, not just over the last year, but over the last 5 years now. As you know, I was the mayor of my community for 31 years. We advocated, along with Mayor Boschkoff, for a number of years for a change in the funding formula being used for these type of projects, and our government listened. So I really have to give credit to them for doing that. It's made a foundational difference in providing the type of care that we need for our residents here in Thunder Bay. So I'm really happy to be part of a government that recognizes that. I'm really pleased to be alongside my colleague, the Honourable Steve Clark, as well as Minister Haidu, for today's announcement. And I want to thank you all for joining us to celebrate this affordable housing project on Huron Avenue. And I want to recognize the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services for their incredible work. Projects like this are critical to the community, and they help more Ontarians access housing that's close to the supports and resources they rely on every day. And I'm pleased that our government is the nearly $4 million investment here, which will be phase 1, which will be 12 units, 20 of which will be fully accessible. This is, as I said, phase 1 of the 6-phase project, and I can't wait to see the next phases moving forward. So, this new building will make a real difference in the lives of the people in this community. It will help those with the greatest need for affordability and tenants who are Indigenous. The building will include parking for each unit, as well as using an energy model that will reduce energy and greenhouse gas emissions by 26%. The project is just one example of the many ways our government is taking action to tackle Ontario's housing crisis. As Minister Clark indicated, we've increased the Homelessness Prevention Program funding by 40%. It's a $202 million increase, bringing it up to the $700 million level. But I think we really need to emphasize that the increase in this program to Thunder Bay has been 200%. It's increased it from 5.5 million to 16.5 million. So it's a really big, and as I said earlier, it's a really good indication that our government is listening about the circumstances in Thunder Bay and the need in Thunder Bay and some of the unique challenges we have in Thunder Bay. So this funding really reflects that. Our most recent housing supply action plan, Helping Home Buyers, Protecting Tenants, is the latest in a series of steps our government is taking to assist renters, spur on new home construction, and help more people in Ontario find a home they can afford. So as we all move forward with our shared commitment on housing, we will continue working with all levels of government and our partners in the sector to ensure that everyone has a home that meets their needs and budget. I'd like to once again thank everybody involved in this project in Thunder Bay, and I'm confident that this development will be a real asset to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich, for that, Kevin. Next up, we'd like to invite the mayor, Mayor Ken Koch, please.
Well, this is a day for gratitude. This is so inspiring just to see the orders of government come together, respond to people's needs, see the organization here pull together, inspire us all, and here we have another project. And thankfully to the provincial and federal governments, the DSAB of which I'm also a chair, you have a lot of people on the same wavelength. We all understand what has to be done. The issues are before us, and we're addressing them. And Minister, in your physical presence here with these projects, it's a real inspiration to us here in the Northwest, because it means the government does understand, and we continue to. Well, we have a long list, so we'll be. So once these we're ready for the next one already. But I'm not saying that in an ungrateful way. I'm just saying that we understand how tremendous the need is, and in addressing so many different variations on the causes and the concerns, it's got to be great for the citizens, for the communities in the Northwest to see the collaboration. And I think today that's a success, and I congratulate ONWA and the organizations that have been pushing for this. So let me just say, we have we now proven time and time again that we're going to be able to do this, and I appreciate the federal and provincial governments answering the call. So thank you very much, ministers.
There's been a lot more awareness of people living in tents and encampments. This summer nearly tripled compared to last summer. We were aware of about 140 people sleeping in the tents as of the end of July. My colleague and I spoke to one recently. He was trying to figure out how to make a makeshift heater for his tent to survive the winter. I'm wondering, projects like these are obviously great, but what will the people experiencing homelessness do in the next few weeks as Thunder Bay becomes colder?
Yeah, we're very mindful of that. That was why we made the historic investment in the budget of adding $202 million to the Homelessness Prevention Fund. That was the 40% increase that we did. And P.A. Holland talked about the increase, which was one of the largest in the province for the Thunder Bay DSAP. The fact that they've gone from just a little over $5 million in support to an additional $11 million to make it 16, and that's exactly what we want the DSAP to set up a plan for. Part of the reason why the government worked with the group, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, to create by name lists is so DSABs, like here in Thunder Bay, could create that plan for people that are either homeless or experiencing the risk of being homeless. That's exactly why we added the extra dollars, and we look forward to working with the DSAB. It's important for us to, rather than making the policy about how a community is going to respond in Toronto and forcing them to act upon it, we allow our partners like the DSAP to deal with things in their own community, right? So the biggest thing we can do is provide them with extra resources, and that's exactly what the Homelessness Prevention Fund does for them. So we look forward to continuing to work with them.
So we're hearing from outreach workers, including from those from DSAB, that there just aren't any units available right now to move people from the encampments into housing before it gets cold. So that increased funding that you spoke about, will that have a direct impact now?
Yeah, that's what we hope it will. And in addition, we just had the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference last week in London, and I can tell you that northern communities made a compelling case to other ministries like the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions to provide additional wraparound services to support the extra dollars that our government has put in on the housing side. So this is an all-of-government approach. We need every ministry to work collaboratively to ensure we've got a better integrated system. So, they made a really strong case to have additional dollars put forward. And, again, I just want to build capacity. With my homelessness prevention dollars, I'm trying to create more units, and I hope that the Ministry of Health will assist with the wraparound services moving forward.
Thank you. And if I could have one more, just seeking clarity on the blend of units for this particular project. How many are affordable? Are there any that are market rental? Is there a blend of transitional units as well?
I always let the proponent of the project to speak to that. So I'm going to phone a friend, and Justin can answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, all of these units will be set at affordable rent levels, so 100% affordable.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark as well. Steps in. So Minister, at last week's AMO conference, the province announced housing targets for a whole host of municipalities, including Thunder Bay. How do you ensure that affordable housing is included in all of those targets over the next decade?
It's a great question. Look, one of the announcements I made at AMO was, it's my intention to table a bill in the fall that will define the word affordable. After Bill 23, there became a number of inquiries from municipalities about both the definition of affordable and also attainable. So we hope to get clarity on that this fall, so that it gives clear direction to municipalities how that's defined. At the end of the day, we want all communities set up for success. Everything I do is getting us closer to ensuring that we've got at least 1.5 million homes built by 2031. We want to ensure that communities like Thunder Bay have a housing target that makes sense, and that we provide mayors like Mayor Boschkoff with the tools to get those shovels in the ground. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation with municipal partners, with big city mayors, with AMO, and also our Housing Affordability Task Force implementation team. So we made a commitment last summer that under the leadership of Premier Ford, every year of our mandate, we would have a housing supply action plan piece of legislation. So we want to build upon that over the next 3 years.
And my second question is for Minister Hyde. Minister, certainly there's been a lot of talk in Thunder Bay about what the true population of the city is in the last couple of years, and we've heard both from the municipal government standpoint as well as DSAP the need to have that clearer population reflected in the count. Has there been any movement on that, and how does that factor into housing targets and making sure that people living in Thunder Bay are adequately housed?
Well, I think first of all, StatsCan does research on population, and I actually spoke to the head of StatsCan after the first round of questions around whether or not the population count in Thunder Bay was accurate. Certainly, he's indicated that if the city or any other partner feels that the count is inaccurate, they can request oversampling, and I've provided the city information about how to do that. I'm not sure, you can ask Mayor Boschkoff if the city has pursued that approach or not, I don't know. But I'll say this as well. I think that arguing about whose people are whose is actually a red herring. And I think that the reality of our communities is that they are mobile, that people come into city for services, for education, for healthcare. They leave. We have a lot of other mobile workers, by the way, that come into city because they work in the mines, because they work in the forestry industry, and they leave. And I think that when we actually start to accept that we are each other's people and we look for solutions like the one today that we are announcing, that's when we're going to see success. And I think pointing fingers is really not an effective way to actually deal with really challenging problems around the lack of affordability, around an economic crisis like we haven't seen in decades, around the recovery from pandemic, and around shifting populations. And so from my perspective at the federal level, we'll be a strong partner to the province and to the municipality to make sure that as populations change, ebb, flow, that we're there with solutions that communities build. Because it is never going to be the federal level or the provincial level that knows what a community needs. And when we step up as citizens, like Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services is, like so many other community groups are, to say to our citizens, you belong here and we're going to make sure you succeed, that's when I think we're going to start to see people feel safer in their communities. And that's what everybody ultimately wants. We want to feel safe. We want to feel safe that if we work hard, we will have a roof over our head, that if we fall into hard times, there will be things for us to reach out for. You know, when I was a single mom, one of the things that helped me the most was ProKids. And it's not even related to your question, but it reminds me of the power of community. You know, a newly single mom, really challenged financially, and I wanted my kids to fit in. And we have this amazing program here in Thunder Bay that's Thunder Bay designed and delivered, that's delivered through hard work and volunteers and some provincial funding, and I'm sure some municipal funding, not even really sure, where every kid has a chance to participate. And I only needed it for a little bit of time. Those kinds of things, when community come together and say, you belong here, and we're going to help make sure you and your kids succeed, that's how you actually create healthy communities. And that's why I'm a federal politician, because I believe we do have a role to play at the federal level in terms of housing, in terms of the many other kinds of supports, things like Canada Child Benefits, so that people actually have the resources they need to raise healthy children. And so for me, the question is, how do we make sure that everybody in Thunder Bay feels like they have a place? Whether they're here for a week, a month, or a year, they should feel like Thunder Bay is a good place to be. Thank you.